Here we are, folks, riding the brand new Santa Cruz Bullit on a beautiful day. Hey guys, Hannah's just pulling this QR sticker off of my brand new Santa Cruz Bullit. 170 mil front and rear travel, 4-bar eMTB powered by the Bosch CX5 drive unit.
That's right.
And 600 watt-hour battery. And today we're gonna go for a rip, learn a little bit about it and see how it does. So is that sticker coming off all right?
You know, it's worse than before, but it doesn't matter.
Okay, well, let's go ride. Welcome everybody out there. We hope you enjoyed today's first ride on the brand new Santa Cruz Bullit. Hannah drove up from Santa Cruz with this bike and we wanted to take her out for a little ride, show her some of the test trails that we put these bikes through the paces on, and of course ask her a couple of questions. So come along as we ask Hannah a few questions, learn a little bit about the bike, and of course share some of our first impressions on how it performs.
Yeah, this is the Bullit. So this is kind of the next iteration of our already beloved e-bike. And as you can see, we moved to 4-bar, similar to the Vala, but this is the Vala kind of on steroids. We have 170 mils of suspension. This is the e-bike with a built-in chairlift, or the bike with a built-in chairlift. So definitely meant for some proper downhill. Like I said, 170 front and rear, just slacker geometry, you know, 63.3 head tube angle in the low setting. So the slackest yet of any of our bikes, minus V10 of course. But yeah, so this bike is meant for some steep and proper downhill. MX platform, so we've got a mullet platform in the wheel set. And yeah, that's the high level.
Okay. All right, so what models are available and what are the price points or the range of price points for the bike?
So this will come in 4 different kits. We have the new SRAM 70, 90, GX Axis, and then XO Axis Reserve, which is this model right here. So starting with the 70, that price point's around $7,400, all the way up to this being $11,900.
And how many will be in the C carbon and how many will be in the CC? I'm guessing 2 and 2?
Exactly, 2 and 2. So that's 70 and 90, the new SRAM cable actuated drivetrains, which is rad, and then on up to GX Axis and XO, which will be on the C frames.
Okay, and I don't want to get you in trouble, but do you care to comment on the you know, evil cohorts of SRAM and how much they pay you to not put cable ports on your CC carbon bikes?
You know, you're gonna have to talk to the product team about what they're pocketing there,
Okay.
but yeah, that CC, we're saying no cables.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you been a part of any of those conversations, like as to why? I mean, from my perspective, obviously, you'd imagine if you break a derailleur, they probably aren't expecting people to downgrade and buy a cable actuated system, because you then have to buy derailleur and shifter.
Right.
But I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, the odds are you're probably going to stick with what you have already. It does, you know, save a tad bit of weight, tad bit of engineering, and just leads to a just cleaner aesthetic for that higher end product.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. And yes, if it's important for people, I guess, to have the cable actuated capabilities, you've got the C model.
You got the C, and honestly, those 70 and 90 drivetrains are awesome.
Okay.
So I think, yeah.
Great. Okay, cool. Well, I think we each just made a couple grand from SRAM, so
Boom.
that plug's done.
I'm gonna take next month off. Yeah.
Okay, and sizes on the bikes. What range is available?
Yeah, so super exciting. This goes from small to double XL.
Okay.
The previous Bullit did not come in small. So this is awesome for someone like me who rides a small. So I'm stoked. And the small will be mullet platform, no 27.5 front wheel. You'll get the 29. So full size range there.
Okay, and I already asked you on the trail, but can you run a 29-inch wheel in the back?
No.
Okay.
This is meant to be a mullet. That's, you know, MX, and we really believe that's the best.
Okay.
The best for this bike.
All right, well, I guess we'll cruise down the trail, have a little more fun, and I don't know, see if any more questions pop up.
Sounds great.
So first impressions, where do we sit now that Hannah has left us the bike and we got a little more time to digest? Overall, from a riding perspective, right? I'm not evaluating anything else other than how do I enjoy this bike while I'm out on the trails. I'm quite happy so far. The suspension feel of the bike, the way that I have been able to get the shock tuned and the bike to feel the way I want to feel in a relatively short amount of time are all things that indicate a solid bike, a good kinematic, a good shock tune, and a good overall package, right? Nothing felt foreign. It didn't take a long time to adjust or get used to. There are a couple of things that I'm going to be working through. I'm definitely going to cut these bars down. In typical fashion, the SRAM Maven brakes need work, and there's just something to be said when brakes aren't working right and they're all over the place. It really kind of gets in your head with, you know, getting you feeling comfortable and confident on a bike. So I think once I make a couple more little suspension adjustments, get, you know, tire pressure's a little more dialed after going back onto these Maxxis tires. I haven't been on them for a little while. Bars and brakes bled, I think I'm gonna kind of close in on that final 10% of like just right on this thing. But to feel as comfortable and fast as I did on this bike, just even actually within the first ride, was really awesome. So moving away briefly from overall ride impressions, moving into like what I think is going to probably polarize a few people, and we can understand, I guess, why. The non-removable 600 watt hour battery. You know, we've got no skin in the game here. We didn't get paid by Santa Cruz. We don't get paid, never have been paid by SRAM to say anything about their products. So, you know, cable ports, non-removable batteries, battery sizes, right? That's not really our department, so to speak. And it's tough for us as reviewers because, you know, from our perspective, like, we're not really ones to dictate what is right or wrong for you because everyone's got a different perspective. If they put an 800 watt hour battery in here, my ride perception of this bike would have changed because there'd be 2 more pounds of battery weight and it would creep up here towards the head tube, drastically changing the bike's manual point, how playful and lively it feels. And to me, then I would be saying like, boy, this bike's sweet, but I wish it was like a couple of pounds lighter, right? Some of you out there are like, this bike's out for me. I can't have a 600 watt hour battery. Or some of you might say, my garage freezes in the winter and I have to have a removable battery. So, you know, it's really tough for us to come up with every scenario and situation as reviewers that could be a deal breaker for you or not. So all we can really try to do is present what's in the bike and how the bike performs on the trail. Those details, I think, really are up to the consumer themselves, because what might be a deal breaker for some could be what makes the bike awesome for others. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. The lack of cable ports probably is going to upset some people. And other people probably are not going to care, because if they break an axis derailleur, they're just going to rebuild or replace the part they break. They're not going to take it off and then go buy a new shifter with cable and housing and a new derailleur and reroute that. By the way, if any of you have done that, I would love to know in the comments. Obviously, we definitely know a lot of people who've been angry about it, but has anyone out there actually replaced an axis and then installed cable actuated? I'd love to know. So yeah, moving into kind of some other polarizing features, perhaps the exclusive use of the 27.5 rear wheel. That's one that would be, I guess, kind of nice to see a 29 out back. I personally can go either way. I have some bikes that I really like that are dual 29. I also get why this is a mullet. It makes sense for the type of riding and aggressive intentions that this bike has. A smaller wheel is usually more desirable, but I'm sure there are people out there that would love to have the option to do both. So far though, what I will say is that the suspension, shock tune, suspension platform, kinematic, are really working quite impressively well on this bike. So even with the smaller wheels, I haven't really noticed a ton of hang up, lag, hesitation out of that back end, even with the smaller rear wheel. And we have a lot of sharp square edge rocks here that we hit at high speed. And that's something that is honestly like one of my main kind of testing focuses on suspension platforms of bikes is how they handle those hits. And honestly, is one of the reasons why I don't love VPP, because they just micro decelerate as you hit every one of those successive bumps, right? And not only does that slow you down, it also aids in fatiguing the rider over time as there's more feedback transmitted to the rider. So even with that smaller wheel, I would say this suspension platform and that new rear shock are making this bike rather smooth. Of course, having 170 millimeters of travel makes a big difference too. Handling, another real highlight so far, and kind of what I alluded to in talking with Hannah. I think Santa Cruz makes some of the best handling bikes out there. The low bottom bracket height is probably going to prove to be a bit of an issue as we test this bike, especially as we head out to Zion Mountain Ranch in Utah next month for our full power e-bike shootout with this. You know, this bike is really low, even in the high position and with 155 crank. So I could see that being an issue for some folks who, you know, maybe aren't riding smoother, newer school, you know, flow type trails, but time will tell when we get into our long-term review. So that's a high-level first ride thoughts on some of the impressions of the ride performance. So in trying to maybe think of any other questions you folks might have, one might be, how does this bike compare to the last generation Bullit? It's pretty hard for me to really give a good definitive answer with so few miles aboard this new bike, and also a couple of years since I've ridden the last Bullit. What I will say is I rode the last Bullit with a coil shock, which helped mitigate some of the negative experiences I have around VPP suspension on the square edge, chunky terrain that I frequent. What I will say though is so far I'm liking this bike better, significantly. I think it suits me more. I think also the fact that it's, you know, now the Bosch Gen 5 drive unit is going to be a big step up for a lot of riders. So I think, you know, the Geo, overall, I'm leaning towards this bike is going to suit me a lot more. It's, I think, certainly a whole lot better looking bike. Not that the other bike was a bad looking bike, but this thing just looks pretty sweet and I'm happy with it. So yeah, stay tuned. We will keep that in mind for the long-term review. If there's other bikes that you would like us to compare this against, of course, let us know. We will be taking this bike to our full power e-bike shootout, which is happening in about a month. So stay tuned for that. And of course, as always, any questions, thoughts, or comments that you have down below, let us know. We'd be happy to answer them. Thank you guys very much, and we'll see you out on the trails.